Can you tell us what happened to you when you arrived in Hong Kong?
What happened to me on the 10th April is a bit concerning. I was detained for 6 hours. I was being interrogated a few times and questioned, searched. And then I was deported.
Is there a role for international bodies like the European Union, the United Nations, and wider international community to do something to stop this backsliding in journalistic freedoms?
We need to stop this situation where we still think that there's a space for negotiations with China, that there's still a space for doing a real normal business.
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Tomasz Koper, sitting in for Divya Gopalan. The World Press Freedom Day on May 3rd marks yet another year of freedoms being eroded by technology, profit-driven economics, and, perhaps the most significantly, by political pressure. Nowhere is this more evident than in Hong Kong. After Beijing introduced the national security law in 2020, the territory's government recently passed another piece of legislation which further limits the ability of local and foreign journalists to do their jobs. So, does this spell the end of Hong Kong's once free and vibrant media? How are journalists working around the repressive regulation? And will Hong Kong join China at the bottom of press freedom rankings? To help us answer these questions, we welcome to the studio Aleksandra Bielakowska, who is the Asia-Pacific Bureau Advocacy Officer at Reporters Without Borders, joining us from Taipei.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Tomasz.
Well, you've recently attempted to travel to Hong Kong to observe the trial of Jimmy Lai, the former head of the now-defunct Apple Daily newspaper. Can you tell us what happened to you when you arrived in Hong Kong?
Yes, and to actually give you a small context about it, it was not the first trip of myself to Hong Kong in the past year, in the past 12 months. We traveled in June 2023 and in December 2023, in December to actually take part in the first day of a trial of the Apple Daily founder, Jimmy Lai. However, we haven't been faced with this type of situation before. What happened in December, and it was the first red flag, is that we've been twice followed by identified people who we are sure were following us because we tried to lose them. But yes, we could enter twice to Hong Kong without any problems. And what happened to me on the 10th April is a bit concerning, and this is the first time it's happening to any of Reporters Without Borders staff around the world, is that I was barred from entering Hong Kong. I was detained for 6 hours. I was being interrogated a few times and questioned, searched. And then I was deported, officially detained and deported without any stated reasons. What is even more concerning, I asked 2 to 3 times about the real reasons why I'm being treated like this. And the only thing that was said to me is that this is the immigration reasons. What is interesting, they were in a way a bit cautious. They interrogated me 2 to 3 times. They asked various questions. They asked me about my work, what is my position at Reporters Without Borders, what is the purpose of me traveling to Hong Kong. Interestingly, they haven't brought 2 other missions that we had. They asked me about my travel history, and they knew I was in Hong Kong before. And again, I stated that I was in Hong Kong to observe what is happening with press freedom, because this is our job, that I'm in a way, business trip to see what type of threats journalists are facing in Hong Kong. But they didn't ask, and they haven't specifically asked me about the Jimmy Lai trial. But what we're sure of, and we can expect, we can basically see that it's probably one of the main reasons, is the fact that I entered the court. I was together with my colleague from Reporters Without Borders at the time. We've been the only international NGO to be in the court to observe the first day of Jimmy Lai hearing on 18th of December, together with various diplomats from democratic countries such as US, Canada, France. But again, we were the only NGO present at the time after the trip, and actually during it, because it was impossible for us to not state who we are and what we're doing there. I took some interviews with the local media, with Minpa, one of the most important mainstream media right now in Hong Kong, which was of course published in Cantonese. So my guess is the main reason why I was the one being detained and deported is my visibility and presence and the advocacy that I did in the past in support of Jimmy Lai.
Speaking of Jimmy Lai, what is the significance of this particular trial? Why are NGOs and diplomats interested in it?
Because this is actually one of the first times that the founder of the media outlet is being faced with so many accusations, so harsh accusations that can end up with him being in prison for life, based on no grounds whatsoever, no evidence, to the point that right now, just a week ago, there was a witness in court, Andy Lee, who was being detained in China for a few months, who has been with a huge amount of evidence that we have been tortured by the Chinese authorities just to give evidence against him. So the level of atrocities, the level of how they want to silence press freedom, this media outlet, one of the biggest media outlets at the time, who was very critical to the government, it was basically investigating and sharing information, factual information about what's happening in Hong Kong. It's just a simple fact of them trying to silence him, silence his newspaper and journalists that were working with him.
Well, on the topic of courts, I want to bring in another voice into the conversation. Here's Iris Xu, the China representative for the Committee to Protect Journalists, on how court proceedings are being used in Hong Kong to silence the media.
I really don't know what Hong Kong journalists will do in the future, but I do know that these court proceedings are designed to basically silence critics, foster self-censorship, and criminalize dissent. Because what we are seeing in court these days are prosecutors taking out regular media operations and then saying that this is part of the evidence of Apple Daily and Jimmy Lai to conspire to collude with foreign forces. But these are simply ordinary operations of a newspaper.
So we're hearing terms like collusion with foreign forces, sedition. This is not the kind of language that most people living in democratic societies are used to hearing in relation to media operations. So how is this being applied in practice in Jimmy Lai's case and others?
So maybe to give you an example actually of other case, so Stan News, which is the second media outlet that was first shut down by the authorities just a few months ago after the Apple Daily, it was actually raided by 300 policemen. The equipment was taken away, a few of its staff was arrested, and two of its chief editors right now facing maximum 2 years in prison for sedition. And what they use against them, which is really insane, is 17 articles that this media outlet has published in the past under pretext that they are seditious publications, seditious materials. So they're using the factual journalistic evidence, articles and the materials to use them as an evidence in the court. And the same thing is happening actually with Jimmy Lai and Apple Daily. It's not just Jimmy Lai being targeted. Why they targeted this media, and we can see because there are huge Cantonese speaking media outlets writing about what is happening in Hong Kong in the local language that were really giving a lot of insights to the people, and people were really reading them on the daily basis. And I think what they were afraid of is that they were afraid of facts and afraid of the truth. So they decided to shut them down, to basically force them to shut down. And right now they targeting the former staff of this media outlets. Again, Jimmy Lai, two Stan News chief editors, except Jimmy Lai, by the way, there's 6 other Apple Daily staff right now in prison, waiting for Jimmy Lai trial to finish. They're taken in a way as a hostage against Jimmy Lai to make sure that basically they can do anything in their power to silence the media outlet, which is very, very worrying. And it's creating the atmosphere of fear actually in Hong Kong. And we can see it also in other contexts because RSF counted today 6 media outlets that were decided to shut down. Many of them were citing the atmosphere of fear, the safety. The last one that decided to leave Hong Kong is actually US-based broadcaster Radio Free Asia. And in the statement, they were very, very obvious. They said, it's because of the security. We are not safe anymore in Hong Kong, so we cannot continue our work in the territory.
Well, how were you protecting yourself when you visited Hong Kong, keeping all of that in mind, that these laws can be applied very widely, very generally. Did you take precautions before traveling?
Yes, we did. First of all, of course, when we met with our contacts, it was their decision to make if they want to meet with us, because any type of collaboration, interaction with foreign organizations, international NGOs, and we know right now this because this is how they presented against Jimmy Lai, for example, any type of communication with Western democracies can be used as a pretext for national security law, for collusion foreign forces. So, of course, we only met with people that decided to do with us to do it, to have this meeting. Second of all, which again shows the extent of threat that is right now in Hong Kong. We didn't take our personal phones. We hadn't got laptops with us to make sure that if we are going to be arrested, interrogated, or detained at any point, that we cannot compromise the people that we're going to meet with.
Well, again, let me bring in yet another voice into this discussion. Laws that impede freedom of speech in the name of security are constantly being debated in Hong Kong. One of the most recent legislations proposed was the fake news law, which wasn't passed. Joseph Ngan is the chairman of Hong Kong Media Overseas, an association of media professionals who have left Hong Kong. He explains why the rejection of the law was not regarded with optimism by the media community.
除咗有國家安全法之外，最近亦都有一個基本法23條嘅立法。咁其實雖然嗰個立法本身係冇針對傳媒，但係包括咗擴大煽動罪嗰個罪行咧，其實好多個罪名咧都係以言入罪。咁呢個係對香港記者嚟講係相當困難嘅一件事。咁我哋見到記者面對嘅唔單單係國家安全或者政府嘅一啲嘅威脅，甚至乎係嚟自佢本身機構嘅高層嘅一啲壓力，甚至乎記者本身因為考慮自身嘅安全。雖然我哋見特首話唔會就假新聞立法啦，咁但係我哋見到其實喺基本法23條入邊咧，其實雖然佢冇一個係罪行係針對傳媒，但係佢當中嘅好大部分，包括對煽動嘅意圖啦，包括對國家秘密嘅一啲嘅定義，係既包括社會發展同經濟發展，其實亦都係處處掣肘住傳媒嘅報導。咁其實相關嘅立法咧，其實亦都係涵蓋咗基本上係以言入罪嘅一個做法，對香港記者嚟講咧，其實係造成更大嘅掣肘。咁呢方面其實我哋並唔樂觀啦。
Well, so on top of the national security law, we now are seeing Article 23 with very broad, very sweeping remit. What has been the international reaction to the passage of this law, to the further tightening of media controls in Hong Kong?
First of all, as you said, it's very broad. So just to mention it very briefly, that it's really introducing the new categories such as espionage, theft of state secrets that can be really used as something against journalists. And we saw it in the past in China when many publisher journalists were being detained under pretext of espionage or theft of the state secrets. So it's very worrying that it's happening right now in Hong Kong. Second of all, also with sedition, right now it can carry 10-year term in prison, when in case of 10 years it could mean for them that it's only not 2 years for publishing something which is seditious, it can be 10 years, which is very, very harsh prison term. In terms of the international community reaction to what happened, I would say it's not enough. The problem with Hong Kong right now is that it's been so long since the first national security law was implemented. There's at least 300 people right now in prison, activists, human rights defenders, former politicians from the democratic camp who are facing life in prison under NSL. And really nothing has happened. There was a lot of statements by the authorities from democratic countries such as US, EU, UK. But what is needed right now is a real action. It could be, for example, sanctions and any other action that would really put Hong Kong in place that they are afraid that maybe the business community will decide to flee away, something that really will pain them in a way to stop this very to stop what they're doing with not only journalists but with other activists in Hong Kong. And the same we actually see, because I mentioned 300 people in detention activists, but we see at least 10 journalists and press freedom defenders right now in detention. Some from Apple Daily. There's some other media founders who are right now also facing the life in prison under national security law. And there's really too little action out there, too little interest outside of Hong Kong, and pressure on the Hong Kong authorities to make sure that these people will be released and that all the charges will be dropped against them.
Well, it's hard to believe that even in the highest profile case in this group, Jimmy Lai, he is a UK citizen, and yet the British government doesn't seem to really be calling for his release. Why is there so little will to do something for your own citizen?
It's a very good question, and I would say I don't have an answer to that. It's very worrying, and again, it's not only Hong Kong. We saw it also in other cases, like Gui Hai, for example, in China. Yang Hanjun, who's also Australian publisher, detained in China too. And this is basically a failure of the democratic countries in general. And I think main reason for this is that they're afraid that they will lose the business opportunities, that they're afraid that they will be left alone, and basically they will have no space to negotiate and speak with Chinese authorities, and also extension also the Hong Kong authorities. But still, like, we really need right now to do something more. We need to have, speak with one voice. If democracies will not come together and basically address those issues, then we'll not see Hong Kong. Hong Kong will become again like the China. Like right now, even in our RSF Press Freedom Index this year, Hong Kong is 135 out of 180 countries. We never see in the history of RSF such a downfall of press freedom in any other territory around the world.
Well, on that point, how has Hong Kong fared in this year's edition of the Press Freedom Index that is annually published by Reporters Without Borders?
So as I said, it's 135 out of 180, which is very interesting to emphasize. Sometimes some countries are going up in the index, but it's not related to actual score of the country. So for Hong Kong, actually the score of it is dropping. It's 1.8 points, and I think the political context is the worst. So it's one of the lowest around the world. So again, it's related to the national security law, the number of pressure that the journalists are facing, how many journalists are right now in detention and facing very, very long prison terms. So I don't want people to be misled about the fact that, yeah, it's going up, but indeed it's going down in overall score. And the reason why it's going a bit up in the index is only because the overall situation of press freedom around the world is getting worse and worse by year and year. And because other countries are facing, like we see what has happened in Palestine, in Ukraine, journalists being killed, harassed, kidnapped in so many countries. In general, the situation is deteriorating everywhere. So it also has implications for territories such as Hong Kong in the overall score and the index.
Well, on the topic of those on the ground who are still trying to continue the often thankless and dangerous job of a journalist, as you can imagine, many journalists have found ways to work around the restrictions and try to continue their mission of speaking truth to power, despite the personal risks. Joseph Ngan, the chairman of Hong Kong Media Overseas, highlights some of them. Take a listen.
我都見到咧，即係好多香港記者仍然好努力喺嗰個夾縫之間咧，係希望可以揾到一啲突破啦，包括係集中報導一啲民生相關啦，或者係一啲對政府嘅一啲做事嘅手法嘅錯處，點出佢哋嘅錯誤啦。咁包括最近嘅一啲譬如環保嘅議題咧，都係有好大量嘅新聞報導。
Well, so we heard about some ways in which journalists are trying to continue their work by refocusing what they're writing about, what the stories that they're telling. What are some of the other ways in which journalists are working around the restrictions?
It's really estimation of RSF, but we know that at least 900 journalists have lost their jobs after the standings of Apple Daily and other smaller media outlets were forced shutdown or decided to shut down due to the atmosphere of fear. Many of them decided to open new media outlets, and we see plenty of them right now in Hong Kong, which are still trying to continue the work. Some of them decided to go on exile, and we see many media outlets right now in, I think it's around 10, in UK, Taiwan, some of Australia, US. So there's still some journalists who are trying to continue the work and to report not only about what is happening in Hong Kong, but also to focus a bit on the people who decided to immigrate, to go on exile and live in other countries, to basically keep the story about the Hong Kong people alive. What people do usually, and it's very interesting, we saw it like our last 2 trips into Hong Kong where we spoke to people, is, for example, when they publish something very sensitive, the editor-in-chief, what he decides to do is not to publish it with its media outlet. It's, for example, deciding to publish it on its own Facebook or social media, so that if something will happen, it will be just to this one person and not to the whole media outlet or the journalists that he's working with. But it's very difficult, I must say. I don't want to say that the press freedom of Hong Kong is dead, because it's not. And again, there's many amazing independent journalists who are trying to continue the work, but it's getting very difficult for them to do it. Journalists are being surveilled very, very often. They're being held by the authorities, threatened sometimes, directly, indirectly. We saw at least 7 international media outlets that received some type of letters that were fixing and saying that what they're saying is misleading about what is happening in Hong Kong. We have people, like, biggest problem I think right now in Hong Kong is the lack of sources, because people are in jail. So people who are supposed, like, who were sources of journalists before for pro-democracy camp are right now in detention, so they cannot speak to the media anymore. Many others decided to live on exile, so they don't know what is happening. And others are just simply afraid, or the government is threatening them not to speak up to the media. So despite this effort and the fact that they try to continue the work, which sometimes give fruit. So again, there are some cases of really amazing investigations. The overall atmosphere is really getting worse and worse. And we can just right now imagine like what will happen with Article 23, which for sure, like taking into consideration how it was written, will be used against the independent voices and also journalists who are still in Hong Kong.
How do you feel about the future of press freedoms in Hong Kong and also more generally globally, because we have seen this trend of backsliding when it comes to press freedoms, journalistic freedoms for a number of years already?
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And this is something we, again, evaluate our work, Press Freedom and Index. And even for myself, I've been working for ourselves just for 4 years, and year by year, I see the variation of freedoms, of press freedom, right to information, of fact that the journalists are starting to be really target of the political forces, of the authorities. They just being considered as enemies of state. We saw it in China for many years. We have right now 110 journalists being detained in China for the simple fact of producing information, sharing some sources with outside international media. Some people that we don't know if they're even still alive after so many years in the prison, because there's no information out there about their whereabouts. And the same we see with Hong Kongers. 10 journalists and press freedom defenders right now are in detention. In 2022, Hong Kong was 18th on RSF Press Freedom Index, and right now it's 135. So we see how much it plummeted, how much it deteriorated in just a simple, 2 decades. So in such a very, very short time, we see this incredible, terrifying deterioration of press freedom, and it's not giving our hope. And again, with all these legislations that are coming into force recently, with the simple fact that even international NGOs and myself, when I'm just an operational staff, saying and watching what's happening there and advocating for cases and trying to join the hearing and to be in the court and being barred for this, it really doesn't give any hope for the future in Hong Kong.
Well, speaking of NGOs and the role they play, is the future of journalistic freedoms basically dependent on those organizations, those people who very often volunteered their time for the cause? Or is there a role for international bodies like the European Union, the United Nations, and wider international community to do something to stop this backsliding in journalistic freedoms?
Yes, again, like we need to stop this the situation where we still think that there's a space for negotiations with China, that there's still a space for doing a real normal business, like how business can continue in Hong Kong when journalists cannot do their work anymore. How even the businessmen or like huge corporations and companies can continue the normal work in Hong Kong when they're not sure anymore if what they do will not be used against them, it will not be used as their argument of like collusion with foreign forces and basically espionage or whatever. I think now democracies need to do more, and it's not only up to us, because we've been speaking about it, like not only RSF but many other NGOs around the world, about the deteriorating situation in Hong Kong, in China for many, many years. But nothing's happening, nothing's been changing in time. We see what's happening in Xinjiang with Uyghurs, we see what happened in Tibet. And if basically democracies will keep not reacting to those atrocities, we might see Hong Kong in very soon very similar situation. And actually we see it already, but it will probably take another few years for them to suppress any remaining freedoms that we see in the territory.
Well, let's hope that if we talk about journalistic freedoms next year in May for the next World Press Freedom Day, we'll have a slightly more positive story to tell. Thank you very much to Aleksandra Bielakowska, my guest today, who is the Asia Pacific Bureau Advocacy Officer at Reporters Without Borders, joining us from Taipei. And for our viewers everywhere, it's been good to have your company. If you've enjoyed today's episode or have anything you would like to add to the dialogue, join the conversation on our social media. And remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected.